Hello, everybody. Welcome and kumusta. Thank you for joining me. This is How, and I am your occupational therapist. And welcome to OT Conversations. In this episode, I would like us to talk about a clinical situation that many OTs might recognize. And it is one of those situations where you are asked a very practical question: can we order a commode for this patient? So it's very typical, isn't it? So it's very simple, but you have a choice. You either order a commode or you don't order this commode. But as an occupational therapist, we know that the equipment is rarely the issue. The real issue sometimes is the clinical reasoning behind this a very simple task, this very simple equipment. And sometimes, especially in palliative care and in a fast track discharge planning scenario, we are even when the assessment is actually not complete. So let us talk about this case that I would like to share with you. And as always, the details here will be anonymized. It is for learning purpose, and we are just discussing a case. So the patient had experienced a gradual functional decline over, say, a month and a half. And this patient, prior to coming into a hospital, had already been struggling at home before they got admitted to your care. So, following the investigations, you have learned that the patient had already been informed that they have had a very bad cancer. Primary is the lungs, and that it had metastasized to the brain now. So, understandably, the patient will be distressed, the family will be distressed. So also, along with this, are so many associated problems, like he could be tired and he's had a lot of information, both cognitively and emotionally, that he needed to process. So then you come across with this case now where the plan is for him to be discharged home, and they will be discharged through a fast track discharge pathway. So the family then obviously is very much worried about it. And while they live in a house, he cannot manage the stairs anymore. So the family and the patient will anticipate that they will have to go and stay downstairs. So a hospital bed is really required for this person to be discharged home. So far, that appears to be very straightforward, right? So the patient will go home and will have a downstairs living, the bed will be arranged, and it will have to be ordered. And an occupational therapist will be ordering this. Sometimes an OT would do this, sometimes a palliative care nurse would do this, sometimes a discharge planning nurse will do this. Just depends on the service. So, different areas, different parts of the country, there will be some people who can or who's expected to order things. So, it's not a national rule, but actually it's an understanding and it happens. So there are some unspoken rules in every hospital. So now let's look at some of the assessment problems. So during the assessment, most of the time when you came in and you've been to see the patient, you noticed that the patient has spent historically on reviews, patients spend most of the time in bed. So the patient expressed that they do not wish to get out of bed because, like I said, the hibernation phase, when the body isn't well, the patient will likely go and be hibernating and they want to be in bed, right? So they do not want to get out of bed. And then when they go home, they're planning that they will just be staying in bed as well. So nobody has seen this guy walked. So he's in bed. Nobody has seen the guy transfer to a commode, and they've not been sitting out on the chair as well. So person is unwell. Most of the time the person is in bed. So an occupational therapy assessment has been attempted. Say you assess this patient and you cannot, on the assessment, you cannot get the person to sit up or to get out of bed, right? And so even on the attempt, the patient will get distressed. And so your attempt to assess, technically they can't do it, but you might note that the case is not complete or the assessment is not being completed, technically, if they're having difficulty, the assessment would have been unable or would need assistance. So at the time, the patient, you review the toilet hygiene, they were using pads in bed. So it is there are some questions. So that you will ask is, the question is this: is it appropriate to order a commode when we have not actually seen the person use one? Okay. So this is where the clinical reasoning then begins, right? Because there is a tension here. And the tensions, there are two competing concerns. The first one being that of safety. So the therapists have not seen the patient use the toilet yet. So this will create an impression that the patient can, sometimes if they want it, it will create an impression that they can use it independently when it's actually not been factually established. So a mobile commode is not automatically safe because it is available for the patient, because the patient, for all we know, may have a poor sitting balance, they cannot stand, they will need assistance if they sit down, and it may depend on whether one person or two people will need to help the person. So the function is actually fluctuating considerably. And so if the patient or the family attempts to do unsupported transfers, then the commode itself could be a part of the risk. But there is also another concern. So the patient is going to go home through a fast track pathway. And this pathway, his condition is likely to deteriorate further, and his ability to walk to the toilet may reduce even further. So if we do not provide the commode because we have not observed the transfer, we may leave the family without any practical option during those periods when he is unable to walk or to reach the toilet. Question is, what do you do? Do you refuse, or do we refuse to provide the commode because the formal assessment is not complete, and pretend that we don't know whether it's suitable or not suitable? So, do you or do you not provide the commode? Okay. So the answer is neither, right? Anticipatory provision is actually not the same as confirming independence. So you remember that, okay? So in this situation and in this scenario, it was considered reasonable to provide a mobile commode. But remember this, only as an Tory measure. Okay? So this distinction is really very important. So you are not saying that the patient is safe and the patient is independent using a commode. What you are saying is that this equipment may provide a useful option at home, but the patient's ability to use it safely has not been fully established. So these are two different statements, guys, okay? So the commode may be useful on a good day, particularly if the patient can transfer with appropriate support. It may reduce the distance that is required to access the toileting. It may provide an option when walking to the bathroom, because if walking to the bathroom is no longer achievable. But we also need to acknowledge that during the significant deterioration, the patient may not be able to use the commode at all. So therefore, the commode should not be the only plan, because this is a deteriorating nature. You're not just going to be debating about the commode, right? You then need to consider having a bedpan and a urinary bottle. Yeah. The pads, the patient is using pads currently, so that is definitely almost like a staple. And the family should understand that the most appropriate option may change from one day to the next day as well. So sometimes within hours. So this is really fluctuating. So remember, when somebody is unwell and they have an active medical problem, the function is not going to be static. So this is particularly important in discharge planning. Okay. We will sometimes assess the function as though it is fixed. Most of the time we see, but remember, there is a high chance that palliative care and deteriorating condition is a deteriorating condition will trickle down on the function. So if you ask, can they transfer? Can they walk? Can they sit out? Can they use a commode? Yeah. It may not be a simple yes or no. It's just, it depends. Perhaps now they will be, but definitely there is a chance that this person may not be able to do it. So patient may be able to transfer in the morning, but it'll be different in the evening as well. Good days and bad days. So the purpose of occupational therapy here is not to force the patient to a single functional category. So our role then would be to understand the likely range of performance, and we need to prepare the patient and the family for the reality of that fluctuation as well. Okay. So when it comes to equipment provision, you can't just provide equipment without explanation. So the family needed to be in on the conversation. So you have to involve the family. So in the model of quality of human performance, patient, the family, they are almost a similar and one whole entity. And that's what we would have to be considering. So family should be told of the patient's transferability. And I'm sure if you've done the session with the family, then they will know that the patient is not, the performance is not fully assessed, right? But family should understand that the commode that is being provided, and it is being provided only in anticipation of a possible need rather than it is a confirmation of the patient's functional ability. Okay. So the family should be advised that the patient should have supervision or assistance whenever using the commode, unless the patient is consistent and is safe, and unless you've been able to establish that. But family should understand, okay, that there are good days and bad days. Okay. There may be some point when the commode is no longer appropriate. So you'll have to rely on a safer one, which would have been a bedpan. Then again, if bedpan is still difficult, then you'll have to rely on pads. Okay. So at this stage, bed-based toileting options is and maybe the only option that we have. And you don't want to frighten the family about it, but they kind of have to anticipate that this will have to take place. So it's about the family being prepared for it. If you see on cases like this where families see the person deteriorating in the hospital, they're almost anticipating it. Yeah. So there we go. What about a formal measure? Do you want to use a formal outcome measure on scenarios like this, like a care measure, for example? I would always justify and I would always say yes, because it's better to have an objective picture very quickly of a case and of a scenario. So care measure is one that I have developed and I am encouraging for you guys to use. Because with care measure, just at a glance, you know she was independent at the time of assessment. You know that the score is this, patient's needing one person and frail, and then you can actually track it down. Because if you have notes and you go look back from page after page, it just stops you from, or it's a boundary, or it's a stumbling block for you to understand the case, especially if the case is going to be passed on to another colleague. So have a formal outcome measure that is available for people to access. So that's really very important. Okay. Now, let's go to the point of documentation. How would you document uncertainty properly? Okay. When an assessment cannot be completed, the documentation needed to be clear. You have to be honest. So do not write, as though the patient has been fully assessed when they have not, or do not imply that the equipment has been prescribed on the basis of observed safe performance if that has not occurred. State what you have attempted. State at state what could not be completed. Just be factual. State the reasons why. Okay. For example, so the patient was engaged to sit on the edge of the bed to access the sitting, to assess the sitting balance and to establish their transfer abilities and their potential. Then you can write down assessment could not be completed because of fatigue, because of distress, and because of reduced tolerance. And you need to state that the mobile commode being provided is on an anticipatory basis. Yeah. State that the patient's safe transferability has not been fully established. You have to indicate that the supervision or assistance is required whenever a commode is used, and state that bed based toileting alternatives can be considered. You can indicate that the family have been informed that the function may fluctuate and deteriorate. That is not a weak documentation. So you can write down, should patient be able and be capable of using the commode, patient can make that decision to use the commode, but OT is suggesting a supervision or a standby assist or a contact guard from a family member so that you can maintain safety. Yeah. So with that, it's okay because you are expressing your perspective. You are putting down your thoughts, which should be reflecting your clinical thought and process. So accurate documentation will protect the patient and the family and the clinical team as well. Okay. So what would be occupational therapy contribution in a scenario like this? This case is not really about ordering a commode. Okay. So anybody can request a commode. The occupational therapy contribution in a scenario like this is the reasoning. So we are balancing safety and comfort. We are thinking about physical environment at home. And we are considering the family's capacity to support the patient. We are acknowledging uncertainty. We are anticipating deterioration. We are thinking beyond this simple piece of equipment, which appears to be so simple, isn't it? We are creating a set of practical options. We're trying to prove or preserve the person's dignity. What else? Yeah, I think those are the things that will highlight or showcase the difference and the importance of occupational therapy. So it's not the product, it's not the form, it's not a tick box, it's not the just a simple adaptive aid. So clinically reasoned plan that reflects the person's situation is the direction of travel in here. Okay. So what else? Learning points. In an ideal circumstance, we would complete a functional assessment. We'd love to do that. Textbook wise, yes. Seen, observed, perfect. Yeah. And we'd be able to observe the transfer. You'd be able to observe the sitting balance. You can deal and you can clarify the mobility. Perfect. It would be ideal. And that would test the equipment. Yeah. It would confirm the safest method. Beautiful. Really textbook. But there are situations and there are times, and there's going to be a lot of times where healthcare does not always give us these ideal circumstances. And as an OT, you will be facing this, okay, because of many reasons: fatigue, person's distress, deteriorating attitude, non-compliance, attachments. Yeah. So in these moments, the occupational therapy clinical judgment is really important, because in scenarios like this where you cannot see around the corner, our role really is not just to assess whether they can actually do it today. Yeah. Our role is to anticipate what's going to happen the day after and the day after. Okay. And when uncertainty then is not possible, then you need to document this uncertainty. We have to explain the limitations. We have to provide the contingency options. Yeah. Like, for example, you cannot provide that adaptive aid. You can't just leave it there. Okay. What's the next solution? Right. So as OTs, we will support the family, obviously, and we will have to make a decision and we'll have to test the safest appropriate decision that we can make with the information that is available to us. Okay. So the next time when somebody asks you guys, can we order a commode, even though we have not seen the patient transfer, the answer is, much as I don't like this phrase, yes and no. Yeah. It's not automatically a yes. It's not automatically a no. The better question here. So that's actually the wrong question. Can we order a commode? Yes, it's a good question. But the better question is, what would be the purpose of the commode? What do we know about the situation? What do we not know? What are the risks? Have those risks been explained? What are the alternative options that are there, alternative options that are available? So that is the OT reasoning, and that reasoning is very important. So thank you guys for joining me. If you learned something today, talk to your colleagues and talk to your friends and to your students about it. Meaning, have this discussion amongst yourselves over a cup of tea, right? Learn together and grow together. Just remember, anything you do matters and has an outcome. Until next time, guys. Bye.